I'm Jane Castillo with Keller Williams Realty. I'm here with Collin Flaherty from SunRevolve Residential and Commercial Solar Consultants. And we're delighted to have him here today to share with us about the benefits of switching to solar power in your home. Hi, Collin.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I am so excited to hear everything you have to say today. So let's get started.
So today we're going to be talking about the solar federal tax credit, which applies to residential and commercial for tax credit years of 2022 to 2023. My name is Collin Flaherty. I'm the founder of SunRevolve LLC. So a little bit about me. I've been grateful to work as an independent solar consultant for the past 2 years. In that time, mainly have been working with residential families across California. Now we're in multiple states. I think now we're over 30 different states and getting into the commercial side as well. So a couple of my kind of foundational things is that I believe knowledge is power. No question is invalid. And if you work with us, you're going to gain an honest, straightforward understanding of the comparison between your utility company and using solar power. You don't have to make a decision the first time we meet, but it is worth meeting. I promise I won't waste your time, and you'll have an excellent experience working with us. But quick disclaimer. So today's topic is it is pertaining to tax. So we have to say that please be advised, SunRevolve LLC is not qualified to provide tax advice, and everyone's tax situation is unique. So while I can explain a few things and I can educate you on kind of how the things sort of work and some of the financial concept, always make sure that you consult your tax professional if you have questions, because they're going to know your situation perfectly. And if you don't normally have somebody do your taxes and you're going to invest in solar, might be a good time to maybe just for that one time have a CPA, work with that person if you don't normally. Even though these things are very simple, it's always good to maximize your potential savings. So that's just a little disclaimer there. So what is the solar investment tax credit, or ITC for short? So it's a federal tax credit that can be used to decrease the tax liability of residential investors in solar property. It can be claimed when a homeowner installs solar equipment. So it can also be claimed when it comes to commercial properties, and that works for brand new solar equipment only. So we can't, no secondhand stuff, but it also works for secondary solar systems. So if you do have an existing system and you decided, hey, I want to add 12 more panels, and that's new equipment, that qualifies for the tax credit, even if you had received it in the past. So just kind of a fun thing there. How much is it? So for 2022, the tax credit amount is 26%. And next year it's on a step down for 22% throughout the entire year. And by 2024, for residential, it'll be 0%. For commercial, I don't have this on the slide here, but for commercial, it's going to be at 10%. So there'll still be some tax credit available. The way that the tax code says that it has to work is that in order to be eligible for the 26% in 2022, for example, the system has to be placed in service working. So that means it needs to be activated and on the grid with the utility company in order for it to be eligible up to code. And fun fact, this year, 2022, they said that the tax credit was supposed to go down, but it was extended. So they say that next year it'll be 22% and then step down to 0. They've been saying that for years. Tax credit's been around since like 2005 to help homeowners and commercial buildings to go solar. But as far as what the government says, this is what we have to look forward to. So the way that, and this definition is what a finance company would define the tax credit and kind of how it works. This is what their paperwork says. The ITC is currently calculated as 26% of the net cost of the solar system, excluding any state and local subsidies. Batteries can be included if it's powered solely by solar. And in some cases, if we need to do other upgrades like electrical upgrades or in some cases roofing, that's actually in the financing, that can be eligible as well. So if you're thinking about doing a roof then and solar, this might be a good thing that you can take advantage of. So what is a tax credit? If you don't know, the tax credit provides a dollar for dollar reduction of your income tax liability. For example, a $1,000 tax credit saves you $1,000 in taxes. So there's non-refundable tax credits and there's refundable tax credits. The solar tax credit is a non-refundable, meaning you have to pay into federal tax credit and have what they would say some tax liability in order to claim it and be eligible for it. Everyone who does solar is eligible for the tax credit as long as they purchase it through a financing or pay cash. They're eligible for it. The real question is, can you use it? And a lot of sales reps out there and companies, they make it to, they don't really go over this stuff in depth. They'll just say, oh, talk to your tax person, or oh, the government's going to write you a check. And that's not always the right information for everybody. The other thing to kind of think about is a tax deduction. So in contrast, a tax deduction can lower your taxable income. For example, if you're in the 25% tax bracket, a $1,000 tax deduction could save you $250. So question we get a lot is, will I get the federal tax credit? Will I get the ITC? Now, I wish I could say everybody is able to claim it and get all of it back in 1 year. But there are some cases where some people may not be able to get it all back in 1 year, or based on the type of income they get, they may not be eligible for it at all. So we may have to use a different vehicle to go solar. But for most people, you know, it is pretty simple. But for those that it kind of depends for, it says one thing you have to remember is that homeowners do need to have tax liability. Some homeowners may not pay enough taxes to take advantage of the entire credit. That's okay. That's a good thing. Unused portions often may be carried to the next year, the next tax year. So a lot of these finance companies will give you a certain period of time, sometimes anywhere from 16 to 18 months. Let's say if you're doing a zero down solar finance, they'll say, okay, Mr. Homeowner, we're going to give you your monthly payment as if you reinvested the tax credit amount of 26%, let's say. We're going to give you that monthly payment for 18 months, and we're going to give you time to collect your federal tax credit so that you can reinvest it and keep that monthly payment the same. And you might have 1 or 2 tax seasons within 18 months to be able to collect it and then reapply it to your financing and keep your monthly payment the same. But let's say you don't get it all back in 1 year. That's okay, because the credits will keep carrying over until you're able to claim it all. You can work with your tax professional to maybe, hey, maybe I'm not withholding enough, or we need to kind of strategize to make sure that we're able to get the full benefit of this. And that's part of why when we sit down, we don't force anybody to make any same day decision, because we want them to look at this sort of stuff and have the time to maybe take what the quote that we give them, maybe talk with a professional, or get a little bit of a quick call to your tax person would solve it. Hey, you know, can you take a look at this? And they'll be able to tell you based on how much you pay in taxes and that sort of thing. There are certain tax circumstances that may prevent the use of credit, and individual tax circumstance varies. So like I said, borrowers should always consult with the tax professional, and this applies mainly to solar financing. If you're paying cash and you're not borrowing anything, you're just paying it to the solar company or to the installer. Here are the forms of income that may not qualify: Social Security, annuity, disability, or insurance proceeds. And if you're not sure, always talk to your tax professional. If you don't have one, maybe try TurboTax or maybe one of these things, but it might just be easier to talk to somebody who does it and they know the tax code so that they can take advantage of it. And if you need a referral for that, definitely reach out to Jane. I'm sure she knows lots of really good people that can help you. So here's an example scenario. Just to use, we're using a large numbers just for easy math. But let's say you have a cost of the system, it's $100,000, and you installed it in 2022, you got it up and running, and then next year you're going to do your taxes. So you're eligible for the 26% tax credit. So 26% of 100,000 is the simplest way to do it is take the dollar amount, multiply it by 0.26. That will give you your tax credit amount. So let's say in an example, this is kind of most people, let's say if your income is about 100,000 per year and you're in that 24% tax bracket, which is pretty standard for most, you would pay about 24,000 into federal taxes. So this only applies mainly to federal, not to state. So remember, you have to pay into federal income tax to be able to claim this. Let's say, you withheld 25,000, and normally if you didn't do solar, if you paid 25,000 or withheld that amount, you would be eligible for the excess back, or the $1,000. So in this case, the homeowner would get their withholding refund as normal, but then part of that refund, as long as their tax bill is done or it's offset, then you'd be able to get the tax credit amount to come back as part of your refund. And that's when you can take that money and either pay yourself back if you paid cash, or you can take that money and apply it to the solar financing, and it just knocks a portion, pretty good portion of that system cost down. Some families take that money, if let's say they're financing it, some families go on vacation with it, or maybe they'll take that money and they'll use it for maybe an air conditioner upgrade, or maybe they'll use half of it for something and then put half back. All the solar financing documents explain in detail that is considered voluntary, that you don't have to take that money and put it back towards the solar. But the way to think about it is, if you don't put it back towards the solar, then the financing will just adjust depending on if you decided to keep it or if you decided to use it for something else. If you're paying cash, like I said, doesn't really apply there, because if you paid let's say you paid 30,000 for a system, and then you get 26% of that to come back, you can pay yourself back, or you can take that money and do whatever you want. So without doing solar, you wouldn't be eligible for this. And all it is an incentive to help you to be able to reduce the cost of solar and offset your taxes. If you're a business owner, then you can offset your taxes in a couple different ways. And that applies to if you're doing your residential home and doing solar. And then if you have a commercial building and you wanted to offset that as well, the tax credit does apply for the commercial side as well. And let's see, do you have any questions so far?
Yeah, I'm fascinated to know that it applies to both residential and commercial. Well, because we usually, when we think of solar, we think of residential clients, and it's good to know that it also applies, the benefits apply to commercial as well. So that's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of advantages to doing solar for both residential and commercial. On the residential side, thinking about how this works as a financial product is you are reducing your cost of expenses. So the electric bill is just like gas, it's going up and up and up depending on what utility company you have. So the solar as an investment tool can actually help you to increase maybe a little, give you a little bit of cash flow back on a month-to-month basis, to where maybe you're saving 20 to 50% of what you were normally paying for electricity. And now that, because solar is clean power, it's cheaper power, it's price protected, that's really the benefit. And the tax credit can increase the amount of savings. It can also help to pay for, like we said, other things like roofing. If a family, let's say you paid for a roof cash, and then you also went and financed solar, as long as you did it the same year, you can take the cost of that, the invoice for the roof and the invoice for the solar, take that to your tax person. they fill out IRS form 5695. So it's one form, and you fill that out, or they do, and they put in the numbers, size of the system, all that sort of stuff. And if all goes well, then you end up with your money back and you can do with it as you please. So
Right.
this is Eduardo and Carmen's system. So kind of just to give you an idea, when we come to the house the very first time, we're doing an initial consultation. So we do an energy audit form. We fill out how much energy the homeowner used in the last 12 months. And we go over, depending on if they want to own the system or if they want to, either own it. Some families want to own it and get the tax credits, and that's fine. Some families just want cheaper power. So that's kind of when most of what I've been talking about applies to cash and financed systems. I'm sure if you've been to Costco or Home Depot and you've talked to the Sunrun people, or you've talked to Vivint Solar in the past, or Sonova, or maybe even SunPower, because they do leases. When you're leasing a system, or you're just paying for the power from a system that you don't own, that's a situation where you're not going to be able to claim the tax credit. So like if I went to Costco and I got a solar system, I didn't pay for it, they paid for the equipment, the permits, the install, the labor, the balance of equipment, everything that I needed to go solar, and I'm just getting a cheaper electricity bill, they're going to claim the tax credit on that, and then hopefully pass the savings on to me as the homeowner. So, or if you lease the system where you're just renting essentially the equipment, you have a cheaper power bill, those are situations where you're not getting the tax credit. So if you don't know, that's definitely something to know the difference, because some people will look at it, well, I did solar, how come I didn't get a tax credit? And maybe the consultant didn't explain it to them properly, or gave them the wrong expectation. So sorry. Back to what we were saying. So when we're in the house, we're doing initial consultation, we're getting as much information as we can, we're finding out all the concerns that they have, any questions. I want to ask them as many questions as possible about what they like about solar, and we want to talk about the pros and cons for them, or what they've heard, because there's a lot of stories of contractors that don't do what they say they're going to do for the price they're going to say they are. Some families have had really good experiences with solar, some haven't. Some real estate agents really love solar and understand it, and they can explain it all day, and some real estate agents have kind of shied away from it because they've had experiences with different types of solar financing, or they've had issues or challenges when they're selling a house with solar or doing a transfer, which these days is not as hard, but definitely we want to make sure that before the family goes and does switches, if it makes sense to switch to solar, then they're not going to be forced to do that the first time we meet. And when we come back usually within about 48 hours, because we don't do any same day or next day, we try to give them time to look at things and get a little bit of information. When we come back with a design and a proposal. So when I'm in the house the first time, I'm writing down, I can tell them, okay, based on your electric panel, this is how many panels we could fit. Just looking at the roof, we can kind of tell them how many panels could potentially fit on the house without pulling a proposal or a design, and give them an approximate price that's accurate within $5, approximate panel count that's accurate within 1 or 2 panels. And when we come back, if we did better on the pricing, then great. If it's a little bit more, then we usually give the expectation that it's going to be a plus or minus $5 on whatever I came with the initial quote. So they do get a price very quickly. There are some solar companies that you sit down with them for 2 hours, they beat around the bush, and then at the end they're giving you the price. And then at that point they're pretty much like, okay, so does this sound good? Are you ready to do it? Let's do it. Let's get you signed up today. And some people are like, hold on, I haven't even decided yet. I haven't read the contract. I have all these questions that you haven't answered. So that's the biggest thing we want to try to avoid, is making sure that we're putting in quality proposals that actually are going to get to install, versus just forcing everybody to do it the same day. So
And that's what we love about you.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that, because there are a lot of companies out there that will be very forceful. So when it comes to looking at savings, in this example, we always talk about utility prices have steadily increased. It's one of those things that people don't really notice as much because they are just paying their bill. They don't really think about it unless maybe they've had family members move in. Maybe they're working from home now, or hey, I just bought an electric car, my prices went up because I'm using more. But if you look at the historical rates of electricity, they have nearly doubled since 2003. In our neck of the woods in Southern California, in our areas like Southern California Edison, PG&E, SDG&E, some of the highest priced utilities in the nation. So if you live in California, you're paying a lot more than what people are paying in other states. So in this example, the homeowner, well, we'll scroll down a little bit. So there, we break down every single month of their energy production or their consumption. And then we build a system that can produce more than what they needed, or at least to what based on whatever their need is. So in this homeowner's their average utility bill was $134. So in the summer months, they were paying a bit higher. They're paying about 200 or 250, which is pretty common for homeowners that don't have any discount program. They're just paying the regular rates. And the way that Edison and all the power companies, the way that they charge for energy is they use a kilowatt hour, which is their unit. It's like price per gallon, but for electricity. So that little meter on the side of your house, usually they've probably switched it to the digital one so they can figure out not only how much energy you're bringing in, but what time of day you're using it to, so they can penalize in different ways. But basically they're saying we're going to charge about 30 cents for each energy unit that you consume from our grid. And then you can see that over time, that same electricity usage 5 years from now with slow inflation would cost more like 37 or 38 cents. So their bill average would be now $163 5 years from now. And then maybe 10 years from now, the homeowner's retired, they're still using the same amount of energy as 10 years ago, but maybe even a little more because they had a family member move in, or now they're using an electric vehicle. So the same electricity on the grid, the cost of doing nothing has now made their bill go up. And 15 years from now, the same usage, $241, and so on and so forth. So essentially, what we do with solar is we say, hey, depending on what their goals are, we can show you for the same amount of electricity or more, you can have a lower monthly payment. And in this case, the homeowner actually opted for quite a bit more solar than what they needed. And they had a specific purpose for that. They actually were converting the detached garage into an ADU. So we actually sat down and figured out what type of air conditioning units they're planning to run, which were like the mini split ACs, and then what type of lighting and what type of, to be able to come up with an estimated usage of how much energy they would need to cover their main house and their ADU, which is this garage back here. Mm-hmm. And from that, we were able to figure out, okay, they're going to need about 10,000 kilowatt hours of energy to produce from their system to be able to provide for the entire home. And that's what we were able to do. We built a system that was able to do that and give them a little bit extra. And in the meantime, they don't have the ADU set up yet, but once it is going to be set up, then they already have the energy to locked in. They have the same rate for the next 25 years. It's not going to change unless they pay it off. And there was no cost for them to go solar. There was no cost for them to switch to it. Basically, they qualified for the financing. Then they took a $134 monthly bill. Now their payment for energy is $107. And that's not just for what they did in the last 12 months. That's for a significant portion of extra energy that we are allocating for a purpose. And any energy that they don't use from that system, it's going to get sent back to the utility company. They're going to store it. The meter rolls backwards into the negative, counting credits to the home. So that's why it says minus $22 utility bill. And their 25-year savings is about $45,000 versus what they would have paid to Edison.
That's a nice incentive when you see it that way.
Yeah. And I apologize. I'm going really fast with this. Normally we go pretty slow through this to make sure that they understand and answer all their questions as we're going through. But yeah, this is a good breakdown because this sort of financing is very like popular. A lot of people are going with the 25-year 1.9, a little bit, not too high on the interest, but not too low. So you can get a nice monthly payment that is doable. And if this homeowner goes to retire, they know that our bill is going to stay the same and electricity prices aren't going to rise more than my retirement. And then in this example, this homeowner was actually eligible for $8,723 for their tax credit. And if we were to say, hey, you know what, we're not going to take that money and put it back towards basically put it on the solar financing, we're going to actually keep that money because we want to do something else with it. As long as they're eligible to get that money to come through their tax refund, then all that would happen was after month 18. So regardless, if they, the cool part about some of these financing options is they'll give you the first 18 months as if you already applied the tax credit amount. And they say the voluntary payment is kind of the way they look at it. After 18 months, if you don't put that money towards it and you decided to keep it, then for the remainder of this loan, the payment would be $145 and it would never go up. For some people, that's good. That's actually doable because they're saying, you know what, I'm used to paying about $130 a month, $10 more a month, or $15, let's say, or however. I'm actually good with that. And I can take that tax credit money that I wouldn't have received because I didn't have the cash to go solar, but I can qualify for financing. I'll use it for something else and then just ride out my bill at $145. A couple questions that people typically have is, if I finance, is it going to put a lien on the house? So it doesn't put a lien on your property. It doesn't put a lien on the house itself. And when you are paying off a system to third-party finance, all it's really doing is putting just a public filing on the equipment itself. It's called a UCC1. It just states that if you were to move or sell the house, or if the worst case scenario, the homeowner defaults or forecloses, then the finance company can just come take the equipment back, but they can't come after the home. So those are things that they write in those contracts to protect the homeowner. So you can see the savings adjusted because we didn't apply the tax incentive. And with applying that, the savings compounds even more.
Nice.
And then this is another thing to see. So this was their loan amount. So on average, the solar systems, depending on the size, you're going to see financed for anywhere from around $30,000. It can be a little bit more depending on the type of roof you have. If you need other adders, like let's say you need an electrical upgrade, and it's not just an electrical upgrade, we've got to move it, we've got to trench. There's all kinds of things. So the cost can vary, but in this case, even though they were financing, their net system cost is $24,000, or over the long haul of what they would be coming out, versus, you're already going to be paying Edison anyways. So we're just offering a way to be able to get cheaper power, and that you have a little more control and predictability of. And you're not having to come out of pocket for this whole amount because there's financing available to help you to do this and just get a lower electricity bill to increase your cash flow. and kind of shows you a little bit more about the savings. So this current average bill would be the same usage could be about $357 average in 25 years or more. We want to be conservative. These numbers of increase are typically about 4% rate of inflation each year that we work off of, so that we're not saying that in 25 years you're going to be paying $10,000 a year for energy, because we just don't know, and we don't want to over promise and under deliver. But this is the cost of doing nothing. So over 25 years, they would have paid about $66,000 based on normal inflation. And by switching to solar, this is what they're saving. And goes a little bit into the environmental impact. And then it kind of shows them the process of, hey, today you looked at your savings report. And at this point, they had already gotten the price, they'd already looked at it. And by this point, if the numbers make sense and match up what we had in the initial consultation, and then we go over any new questions or things that they might have had at this point, then if it still makes more sense than paying Edison, we would get them switched over. And that's kind of the process of for owning the system if you're going to finance. And these numbers are, if you're thinking about it on commercial terms, commercial is very similar to residential. It's just larger systems, larger electricity bills. There are a few things that might differ, like demand charges and a few other things that you can do on commercial that you can't quite do in residential. Like it's a little bit easier to do depreciation of the solar equipment on commercial, but you can, if you work with certain tax pros, they can help you actually depreciate and claim the depreciation on the residential side. So don't want to get too into the weeds here, but looking at this proposal, Jane, did you have any questions? Or if you were the homeowner and you're looking at this, what questions or concerns would you have? Because it sounds good, but what are any potential downsides?
That's a good question. Well, as it comes to numbers, I don't see a downside with the numbers. Just a normal question that I would have would be, what happens if the power goes out? Do I need a power wall? Because these numbers right here, they all look very good. And I really liked that you mentioned that your payment is your payment throughout and it's flat. That was something that I didn't realize. So, and then seeing how it added up to that yearly savings. Oh no, over the course of 25 years, that amount, that was a good chunk of change. And you realize, oh, wow, I'd rather keep that 45,000. So those are all, gosh, those are good incentives to make you want to get to switch over to solar. What the only downside, I mean, I would just like to know about when the power goes out. Do I need that extra power wall or does my solar kick in? That would really be my question. Okay, yeah, and that's a really good question, because this system doesn't include a power wall or any backup storage. If it did, then the numbers would be different. And a lot of times right now with power walls and backup generators, we can absolutely install those. And I have multiple installers that are great at that. But at this point, it just matters. It's kind of a thing of, is that going to pencil out for your situation? Because it could make the financing go up higher and your monthlies go higher. But what happens in a power outage, let's say this home that has solar, this home doesn't. If the power had to go out for any sort of reason, all the homes get put offline, even if they have solar. The reason a lot of companies people don't explain this to homeowners very well, but if you have solar, it's a safety thing that you can't work your system in a power outage, because if your system was online and let's say a power pole outside of your street was somebody hit it and there's issues, and then your system is producing electricity
and then it exports power onto the grid, or what we would call backfeed onto the grid. And then there's a downed power line that could potentially cause some issues for the linemen that are working out there. So for safety, or grid safety, as the utility company calls it, everybody gets shut down, with or without solar, unless you have a way to back up your power. So like a power wall is very popular. Those power walls, most families will opt for maybe one power wall. And what would happen, usually the better scenario is that they take like a sub-electric panel, and we'll just put in maybe 4 essential breakers, or they call essential loads. So like your lights, some appliances, and maybe like your internet modem, but just basically just a few small things. If you wanted to run air conditioning off of one power wall, it's just not powerful enough to do it.
Oh, okay. That's really good to know.
Yeah, because there are a lot of ads out there, and people that say, hey, if I have a power wall, I can power my entire home in a power outage. Yes, you can power the home temporarily, but only some parts of it. So if you're a family that's thinking about getting a power wall, we could simulate a power outage and just turn on 4 of the smaller breakers and kind of simulate what a power outage would be if you were running off of your battery. The thing with that though is, if you wanted to run air conditioning, you would need like 2 or 3 or even 4 backup batteries. And now you're talking about a lot of price there, because batteries are, at this point, they are a little bit expensive and cost prohibitive. Solar equipment's been around forever. It's gone down a lot. It's gotten more efficient. So I think it pencils out a lot more for families. But depending on the installer you work with, like let's say this family today in 2022, it's going to be too expensive for us to use a battery, and maybe we don't have any medical equipment or any like serious need for it. We're just going to do the solar this year, and then if our installer allows us 5 to 10 years from now, when battery pricing comes down, maybe at that point we could retrofit and add a battery.
It would make more sense. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no
Because
worries.
that's always been like the $1 million question for me. Like, what happens then? So that's great.
And now with this family, like we talked about, they have more solar panels than what they actually need. So, we could actually add more if we wanted to, or we can take some away. So if you don't know, just super quickly, most time, if we're going to look at a home and we want to put panels on the south facing roof, because they're going to get the most production all day long and throughout the year, the second best spot would be the west side. And then if we use that, then the east side would be the next. Anything north, you're going to lose about 30% production, because it's just not the same sunlight. It's not as direct. So that's why we typically, if you have panels put on the roof, then they're going to produce more power on the south, and then on the east and west, roughly. The way that I figure it is based on tons and tons of past proposals. I could say, all right, if I have a panel that's about this size on the south side, it should produce about 600 kilowatt hours a year. And then that's how I can add up and figure out how many panels we need. If I run out of space on the south, then I know that east or west is roughly about 495 kilowatt hours a year. So that's how we can price these things out without having to, because sometimes these proposals get a little overwhelming for the homeowner, especially if it's your first time seeing it. So that's why we try to talk about these numbers as quickly as we can and educate them on what the system's doing, how Edison or their utility company charges them, and those sorts of things, so that when we talk about incentives, the tax credits and all that makes sense. And so whatever their system, in this case, whatever they don't consume from their solar system is going to get sent back. And if they don't have a battery, that's okay. It goes back and exports to the grid, and it counts credits to their home. So that way Edison will kind of store that excess, and then they'll sell that power to other neighbors. So they benefit from it too.
Okay.
And that kind of prevents the homeowner from the concern of, if I know that I'm only producing and using power from my system, and I'm not having to buy more power from Edison above that, then that prevents you from having to pay solar and a bill to your utility company.
Got it. Wow, that's great. I loved how you put the extra panels, the example of where the other panels could go.
Oh yeah. Yeah, this is a design tool that we use a lot. And then another one that we like to use is Aurora. So this one's kind of, so we try to things as visual as possible so that the homeowner gets to see like this. All of the ones that are grayed out are ones that we could put. And at that point, we can show the homeowner where we would like them to go, or what would make the most sense, the most production. And then at that point, they could let us know which ones they want, or maybe they want to add or take away. So that way, when we come out to install, they know exactly where they're going to go. Or we know that, hey, if for some reason we can't put them here, then we have other options for you, or we're going to let you know, because once they sign off and they're ready, then we submit these plans, we get plans back, and then we audit those plans to make sure that it matches with what's on the contract. Those get sent to the city. A couple engineers from the city are going to look at those plans, pull up the home's actual, in some cases, they'll actually pull up your blueprints and make sure that that system design is safe to install, and that the home is going to be able to support it over the long haul, and they'll stamp it and approve it. So that way, that's how your permits get approved. Once the permits are approved, we can come out and install. And once it's installed, you don't turn it on right then and there. We have to pass a final inspection with the city to make sure that we did a good job and our installer did great. If there's anything that the city says you need to change, we'll fix it. They do as many of those as they have to until they pass inspection. Usually they pass the first time, but there are some, it is construction. So sometimes certain cities or different areas, they might have a different opinion, and we just make those guys happy. So that way we can pass the inspection and then do the final step, which is called permission to operate. And that's where we actually have been granted permission to run on the utilities grid. So they're letting us use our system on the grid, and that they recognize the equipment and that it's safe to run and that they don't have any issues with it.
I love the visuals of it too.
Yeah. These are kind of fun because you can kind of see all of this crazy stuff.
Oh, look at that.
Where this house is getting the most sunlight, and the actual sun path throughout the year.
Look at that. That's fascinating. Look at that.
Yeah, so we try to make it fun, and the electricity bill is it's not always the most fun conversation, but this is their home, and this is an investment.
Yeah.
And they want to know that they can trust the consultant that comes out and talks with them, as well as the installers that we're partnered with, that are going to do a good job, do what they say they're going to do for the price they say they're going to do it. And if something goes sideways or doesn't work exactly how they want it to the first time, then we're not going to duck and hide and not answer our phones, or not only call you when there's good news. For the most part, solar is pretty simple. It's just a simple home improvement upgrade. There are cases where it can be a little more challenging, like if we're doing roofing, if we're doing electrical, if we're thinking about electric vehicles and all these other things. But our job is to just make it simple, easy, and efficient. And if we have to go over the same topics multiple times for you to understand it, that's totally fine, because we want a long-term partnership to where you feel comfortable working with us, versus just trying to sell you the panels and never talk to you ever again, like some companies can be.
is there an ideal age of the roof that it should be before you get the panels installed? Or, I mean, like, what would be too old, I guess I should say, of a roof to put the panels on?
Yeah, so I would say for most homes, like this is composite shingle, so this roof on the satellite image is actually not what they had in person. They had replaced their roof. So when we come out, we take a lot of pictures and double check all these sorts of things. But usually, technically, we can install on any roof age, but there are some situations where it's not good to do that, particularly for the homeowner or the installer, because some solar companies will walk away from certain roofs because they can't install on it. So typically you want to have as much life in that roof as possible, at least 5-10 years. Let's say if you only have about 5 years left on your roof, it might be better to just take care of the roof now and then do the solar. So that way we're protecting that investment of both the roof and the solar long term. If you did your roof maybe 5 years ago and it's still in really good shape, it doesn't have a ton of damage, then awesome. We'll come out, we'll install it, and the solar, wherever it's installed, typically in the south or west sides, is where the sun gets hit the most. So, you know, kind of the cool thing is if it's installed professionally, it's going to increase the lifespan of that roof because they're taking in sunlight, not your shingles. And you might see a small decrease in temperature in the attic and potentially in your house, just very, very slight. And because they're like a protective barrier, they're very strong. You can even, the good ones, you can drive a car on top of them and they wouldn't break. So it's like having a protective layer on your roof, and it could, in some cases, help the roof last longer. But we wouldn't want to install on any roof that was too old. I can detect it when I'm in the home, but we also do a site survey. So we'll have a technician come out to the house after the contract has been signed and submitted. They'll come out within a few days of that and do a really in-depth site analysis. So they're going to look at your roof top to bottom to make sure that the solar is safe to install and that we didn't miss anything. Like, you know, there are cases where wood shake is one that we can't install on. It's not up to fire code. If you don't have plywood in your attic and you have like that compressed wood that is like, you know, like wood shake where it's very much more prone to leaking, then we would advise the homeowner to some sort of solution to replace that before we do solar, because we don't want to increase the chance of them having any leaks or damage. And then if the roof is safe to install on, most installers have a 25-year warranty on the roof itself, to where they're going to actually guarantee there's no leaks or damage on the roof penetrations. So if any leaks happen or anything goes sideways, they have to come out as long as it's in the areas where solar was installed. They come out, they fix it. It's no cost to the homeowner.
All right. Good stuff. So how do we get a hold of you? You did a really good job of sharing all of this information. I'm like, I definitely learn every time I talk to you. So this is great.
Thank
And
you.
I love your QR code too.
Oh, yeah. So I appreciate it. So yeah, that is going to be the best way you can scan it and get a hold of me. The other way is if you go to sunrevolve.com, all one word, spelled normal, you can get a hold of me there. And if you also want to call or text me personally to be able to, if you have questions about solar, roofing, if you're a business owner, if you're a homeowner, then you can reach out to me on my direct line. It's 619-330-6276.
All right. And with that, I just again, I want to thank you for taking the time and making this presentation to us. I'm sure it is very valuable to everyone that tuned in. So thank you so much, Collin. And again, if you want to reach out to him, he's your guy. He's the one that I trust. So give him a call. All right, Collin. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.